start the recording. Thank you. And Joanna, will you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Joanna Armstrong. I am the RFQ lead, and I'm the one you'll reach out to if you have any questions that come up, and I use she, her pronouns.
And for any of you who just joined, my name is Kalea Domingo, and I'm going to be the program manager working on this childcare wage boost pilot. So thank you for joining us. We will go ahead and get started with the presentation. And as I said, feel free to ask questions throughout. So today during our conversation, we'll be doing a short overview of Best Starts for Kids, which is our funding source. We'll be talking about our childcare strategy, and then we'll really get into the childcare wage boost pilot and this RFQ. Joanna will help us describe the application process and answer any questions that you may have about the Zoom grants platform, and then we'll go into general questions and answers. So again, you're able to ask questions directly in the chat box. If you're on the phone, we'll make sure that we open up the line so you can ask questions from your phone. And if you have questions that occur after you're done with this session or we don't get to them, you can always email our RFQ lead, Joanna, through this email address, and we will be able to answer any questions through that email address. So our funding source is Best Starts for Kids. The vision of Best Starts is that we believe that every child, every baby, every young person in King County deserves a happy, healthy, safe, and thriving life so that they can then become successful adults. Our mission is really being able to support families and communities to be able to meet the needs and offer the opportunities that all of our young people and families need so that they can be successful. We recognize that there are inequities that exist in our county that are really ingrained in place and in the histories of the ways that racism has perpetuated inequities. And in order to be able to address these inequities, we center equity, and we are really committed to working through the journey of addressing which inequities exist, how we can create stronger systems within King County to support communities, to drive solutions, and to really disrupt the ways that we've seen inequities be perpetuated throughout our government structures and within our communities. And so equity is really fundamental to the community and the vision and the mission of Best Starts for Kids. We know that equity is not solved and the solution is not present just overnight or because we have engaged in a few trainings. We really believe that it is an ongoing journey that we all are committed to and a practice in order for us to really understand the roots and to come up with new solutions and to really think about the ways that we can all work collectively to create a more equitable King County and a more equitable society. So all of the work that we do centers equity, and as individuals and as strategies, we really ensure that we're working on this collectively and we're really being able to reflect with our communities the solutions that are needed to be able to create a more equitable King County for all of our children and families. We do this by through investing in promotion, prevention, early intervention, and policy systems change so that we have the conditions within our communities in order to be able to live healthy and thrive, that we're able to create systems and structures to reduce the bad and increase the good, and that when things are coming up, that we have the systems in place to intervene and to be able to reset and to really support people when they are in situations or in challenges. This work is really, to me, focused on the policies and systems change. We need to be investing in the sector of childcare so that our workers, our children, our families can be supported throughout our lives. So whether that's a childcare worker who is working within the sector, it's a family who is seeking care, or it's a child who's in care, we need to invest in a healthy and holistic childcare sector. So the childcare work is actually a new component of Best Starts for Kids through the 2.0 levy. The childcare strategy is roughly 200 million, and that includes the childcare subsidy, as well as the childcare workforce demonstration project, which is how this pilot was referred to in our implementation plan. So you'll see on the RFQ that we've connected the language to the child care workforce demonstration project, which is how this work is framed in our implementation plan. But it's kind of cumbersome. So moving forward, we're going to be talking about the child care wage boost pilots. This is the breakdown for all of the additional Best Starts for Kids funding. And so you can see the other places in which Best Starts for Kids is investing. So we'll talk a little bit about our childcare work and the childcare strategy. So I'm sure for those of you who are joining this call, it's not a surprise that childcare, is integrated into the Best Starts for Kids levy. We've long known that childcare is in crisis. We've known that childcare workers are paid too little. We know that childcare is too expensive for many families. And there are many ways that our government can actually be investing in childcare. So through these reports that are outlined here, we've been given some feedback, and there's been some recommendations given from our community, from our state, on steps that we can take to really address the childcare crisis. And so this new phase of Best Starts for Kids is testing 2 new strategies: our childcare subsidy, which provides direct payments on behalf of families so that children can access childcare. And we're going to be piloting a childcare wage boost pilot that will allow us to think about the ways that we would need to support increased wage for childcare workers to be able to stay engaged and sustained and supported while they provide this vital resource in our community. We recognize that these are just 2 strategies out of many strategies, and we really aim, particularly through our childcare, our wage boost pilot, that we'll be able to uplift and amplify other learnings to be able to support more holistic changes in the childcare sector. And I'm going to go ahead and put some of these in the chat. You'll also see in the RFQ that we've linked to many of these reports. So if you're interested to be able to think about some of the data that we've built off of, or some of the recommendations that we've built this work off of, they're highlighted here in these reports. So the wage boost demonstration project, which is now the childcare wage boost pilot, is scheduled to run through the end of 2027, which is the entire life of the levy. So we currently have about $5 million annually to support the wage boost. That includes the administration and the direct payments. Right now, we are scheduled to be able to reach 1,400 providers over the course of the levy. So the original language was that we would reach 1,400 providers annually. And it's really clear to us and to others in the field that we need an actual investment of more than $2 an hour, which was what the original 1,400 was based off of. So because of inflation and many other factors, we don't think that the original $2 per hour will be able to make the impacts that we would like to make in the sector. And so we've been negotiating on What is the number that we want to be able to reach that also provides a robust wage boost for the childcare workers that are engaged in the pilot? So currently we will need to reach 1,400 providers through 2027. We want this work to be guided by childcare workers and others in the sector. So the development of this pilot was informed by direct recommendations that were pulled together through different groups that were convening around childcare. And we want to ensure that this pilot is really supported and guided by childcare workers themselves and others who work in the childcare sector. Because this is a pilot, we know that there's no guarantee that it will continue on. We want to ensure that any of the learnings that we're able to, to bring about during this pilot, that they will actually contribute to long-term change within the sector. So we're going to be investing in evaluation and learning related to the impact of the wage increase on worker retention, continuity of care, and worker well-being, with the intention that then those learnings or that data will be available to others in the government, in childcare advocacy or organizing, to be able to leverage that to inform future changes and ongoing changes. So this pilot, we know some things about it already. We've done some learning over the last year to be able to help components of the design, and some of the design was already set forth in our implementation plan. So what you see on the screen right now are things that we already know about the Child Care Wage Boost pilot. So we know that there are specific communities that we want to invest in. These communities already face childcare challenges, or they are communities within King County or Best Starts for Kids that we want to ensure that we're investing in. Some of those communities might be communities where there are childcare deserts. It might be low income and communities of color where we know that there's already challenges finding childcare and culturally relevant childcare. So there's different communities that we know that we want to invest in. And we also know that this is a pilot that is going to serve all of King County. So there will be some prioritization criteria that will need to be applied in the design and selection. The wage boost is going to be a salary supplement that will be eligible to selected sites, and then all workers within the site will be eligible. Some feedback that we received early on from childcare workers was that we want to ensure that all workers within the site can receive the wage boost. So not just say a lead teacher, but it would include all the different supportive roles that are at our childcare sites. Again, learning is really intentional in this pilot, and every partner that will be working with us, so the design partner, the administration or the payment administration partner, will be supporting data collection and learning outcomes for this work. Again, we want to ensure that childcare workers themselves and others in the sector are really embedded and engaged in the design, the implementation. This is a typo, it says implementation and ongoing learnings from the pilot. And then we really want to make sure that those learnings don't just sit, within a drive at King County, but we find ways to be able to share that learning out. Maybe we're thinking about videos or presentations and panels, ways so that we can ensure that our learnings are able to influence and be used to leverage changes throughout the childcare sector. Components of the design that we already know as well. This is a King County levy, so the resources are going to be for childcare sites that are located in King County. They need to be sites that are licensed with the state of Washington, and they can either be a center or a family home childcare location, and that there will need to be children that are currently enrolled at the childcare site. and I did speak a little bit about the priority communities for the pilot. You will be able to see more of those outlined in the RFQ. And then this is one place where if you're following along in the RFQ, this slide is not in sequence with how the RFQ flows. So this I think is on page 14, but I wanted to make sure that this was elevated in the presentation, that there are going to be specific components of evaluation and the collection of data. So Best Starts for Kids uses a results-based accountability framework where we ask the questions, how many people were served, how well did something do, and was anybody better off? So there will be questions that all pilot partners will be responsible for submitting data and data collection related to the numbers of people served, thinking about feedback and continuous improvement around how well the pilot's been implemented, and then really the outcomes of what was the impact and who was better off. Because we recognize that this question of how well did we do and is anyone better off can be really challenging to answer all on our own, we will be working with an external evaluation partner that will be brought in to help us to answer that question, particularly the question of, is anybody better off? So we'll be doing a larger external evaluation of this pilot, and that RFQ is hopefully going to be available later this fall as well to bring in a partner to help us with that evaluation. So this RFQ overview, we are going to be filling 3 distinct roles through this RFQ. They are identified as the design and implementation lead, the payment administration lead, and the wage boost work group lead. I will be going through them one by one and describing the differences in the role as well as the differences in qualification. This team will come together and will work as a collaborative group, and they're going to be building off planning and design work that has already occurred. So as I've attempted to lay out, there are some things about this pilot that we already have designed and are already established, but there's still a lot for us to work through together. And the hope is that we would be able to launch the pilot in early 2024. So there is an ambitious timeline, which we'll go over. And there's flexibility there, but we really want to ensure that the groups that are brought on are able to start, collaborating as soon as we move through the contracting stage. And the ideal is that we would be able to get materials out to community and resources out to community sometime within the first 6 months of 2020. So here's a timeline, and again, ambitious timeline. There's flexibility in some of these dates, but in the RFQ, we've talked about different phases. So I see that there's kind of 3 key phases. So there's phase 1 that's really focusing on the design, the development of the pilot, the policies, working together as a team to understand our roles, and that will be all in Q1. At some point in Q2, we're going to actually start to do the outward facing work of being able to communicate to childcare sites, being able to do outreach. We'll go through the application and the selection and ideally the enrollment so that towards the end of Q2, we would ideally be able to start issuing direct payments. Then we would move into phase 3. This is more about the maintenance of maintaining the program that we've developed. We'll be going through a lot of quality improvement processes. How can we improve what we developed? What challenges or bumps are we running into? What feedback are we receiving directly from the workers or from others in the sector that we can then bring into our pilot and really respond to? And then the ongoing data collection and sharing of learnings. So the desired qualifications for all respondents, this would be for everybody that's going to be applying, that there is an understanding of equity and social justice, and that you can provide specific examples from the childcare sector. We want to know that the organizations that are working with us have standards for service delivery to meet the needs of diverse communities, and that they're really centering their practices in ways that are focused on relationship building and equity, and have understandings, conceptual understandings, but also are able to describe the practices that they use. We want to know that the groups that are going to be working with us have experience working with BIPOC communities and have experience elevating community leadership. As I described earlier, we want to ensure that the workers' voices are directly giving voice to the design, to the implementation, and to the evaluation. So we want to know that any group that joins us has been successful in really working with diverse communities and building in community leadership opportunities. This will be a collaborative team, and so any group that has worked with that will work with us has experience working on collaborative teams. That could be in one agency or across agencies, and then familiarity with community engagement strategies and implementing them. So being able to get broad information from communities and then translating that into the recommendations and the practices that we implement. And then we want to, this is new, so we want to have groups that are willing to try to test these new programs and really join this with interest and excitement to pilot and test new things. So who should apply? This is really an RFQ that's open to anybody. It can, as long as you're fitting the qualifications, it can be a for-profit or nonprofit, community-based organizations, tribal organizations, public or governmental. We do encourage small groups to apply. That is part of the Best Starts for Kids commitment towards equity. And we'll talk about the technical assistance that we are able to provide to support that. And you can apply for one or multiple roles. And we'll talk more about that. So if you want to apply as a partnership, there is an opportunity for you to indicate that in the Zoom grants portal. So we can imagine that partnership would occur potentially for a single role. These are large roles with a lot of qualifications, with a lot of responsibilities. And so a group of organizations may come together to apply for an individual role. And that is totally okay. If a partnership wants to apply for one role, they would then be selected, or they would then be scored and reviewed as one application. And if they are selected, they would have one organization to hold the contract with DCHS, and then the other organizations would be subcontractors. If groups want to work with each other across roles, you can indicate that as well. So you would be able to indicate in the Zoom grants portal that you are a partnership applying for multiple roles. So for example, if there was a partnership who wants to apply for role 1 and role 2, but they would have different lead agencies, they would apply separately, but they would indicate in the Zoom grants portal who their partnership is. And Joanna will go a little bit more in depth in that section. So role 1 is the design and implementation lead. This is a contract for the contract period of January 1st, 2024 through December 31st, 2026. We are scheduled to run this pilot through the end of the Best Starts for Kids levy, which would be through 2027. And our intention would be, if all is going well and we all agree to continue working with each other, this role would be able to receive a contract extension to work through 2027, and then would receive additional funds to be able to continue that year-long contract amendment. So there's approximately $1.425 million in this lead role. This role will manage the overall pilot. They will really be responsible for working closely with DCHS and the other leads to ensure that child care workers are brought in and supporting the design, the development. They would develop the policies and the processes and operations. They would maintain communications materials that would include a website. And then they would also lead the development and provide the outreach and technical assistance to child care sites and workers. And then they would support the ongoing implementation of the pilot. And that would include data collection, continuous improvement, and updating and maintaining any policies and processes, and ensuring that we have the right number of child care sites enrolled, and that the child care workers are enrolled in the pilot. So the qualifications to be able to successfully implement this role, that this lead organization would understand the current context of the child care sector, particularly within King County. They would know the landscape of organizations also working on child care issues or with child care work. They would understand the impact of this pilot on workers' wages and what the impacts would be for the larger outcomes within the sector or within individual workers. And so being able to understand why this is important and what impacts it could happen. They would have experience developing and maintaining new programs, project managing complex projects with multiple partners, have experience with community engaged data collection and continuous quality improvement, and then really using data to inform design and policy. Understand childcare networks and communications channels to be able to design and host outreach. Have experience providing outreach to communities who are multicultural, linguistically diverse, and face technological barriers. I actually just had a conversation with some of our team today that it's not just facing technological barriers, but also people who prefer to communicate in different ways. So how are you able to outreach and communicate to diverse audiences? And then that there would be experience providing technical supports to communities. And you'll see for 7 and 8 that we don't explicitly say that you have to have worked in the past with child care workers, just that you're able to demonstrate that you've worked with multicultural and linguistically diverse communities. And then that you can provide or subcontract to provide linguistically appropriate services and translated documentation in the top languages preferred by child care workers. And that would include, but not limited to, Spanish and Somali. So again, we've phased out the pilot into these 3 main phases, and the activities might be adjusted depending on which phase we're in. So this very beginning, it's going to be a lot about really designing. And then when we move into launch, you're going to be implementing. And so this is where this role would really be offering that communications outreach and technical assistance, and starting to develop their evaluation and continuous improvement. I see the launch as probably, even like the first 6 to 9 months of when the pilot is in operations, and then we would move into maintenance. It may be a less intensive time related to, doing community engagement, but we might be engaged in some evaluation activities. We're going to be not developing as many policies, but maybe refining them. So we don't know what the work will look like as we move into the maintenance phase. And as we learn about the pilot and the needs of these different roles and the needs of our community. So we want to ensure that we are building in flexibility around what we think this role will continue to look like as we move throughout the pilot. The second role is the payment administration lead. This role is funded for the same contract period, again, with the intention that we would continue on for that additional year in 2027. There would be $1,050,000 for administration of $18.4 million of pass-through funds. So this $18.4 million, the payment administration lead would be responsible for, but it would be separate from the administration. So the $1,050,000 is really the cost that the organization will need to be able to issue those payments. This role will be responsible for making the payments. And in order to do that, they'll need to be able to work with the design and implementation lead to support the pilot infrastructure and systems. They would be responsible for supporting the design of the application and hosting the application, developing data management systems, communication systems, and the payment distribution model, and ensuring that they're maintaining the information needed to manage the fund administration. So that would include forecasting and tracking the budget of the direct payments, monitoring and verifying that payments are received and that the workers are still eligible, and then coordinating with the other lead to ensure that we're maintaining the right number of workers enrolled in the pilot so that we're able to stay within the budget, but also we will be able to use all of the resources that we have. This payment administration lead will also really be key in supporting evaluation planning and data collection. So this set of qualifications is somewhat different than what you saw for role one, in that this is a really technical role. And so we want to ensure that this partner has the infrastructure to be able to provide that ongoing direct payment to the participants. We know with the resources that we have available, it's probably unlikely that we would be able to really develop new infrastructure within an organization. And because it's a pilot and we have limited time, we really want to bring on a partner that already has that infrastructure already developed. Because the workers will be sharing personal information with us, we want to make sure that there's an infrastructure to secure and protect that information, that this group is able to work with us on a changing landscape. Again, it's a pilot. There may be budget changes that we don't foresee, and so we'll need to be adjusting to things. We are trying to bring on more resources, so it could be that we get more resources. It could be that there's increasing costs somewhere, and so we just need to be working together to ensure that we're effectively adjusting to the landscape that we are operating in. This group will need to track and forecast spending, that they are coming to us with experience already distributing direct payment programs. Again, as I shared in that first qualification, we know it's not enough resource and we are pretty time limited, so we're not able to invest in a new infrastructure or a new program. We need to know that there are strong internal controls related to accounting and financial systems within the organization, that we can be accountable to taxpayer dollars, and that would require that the organization is able to submit financial reports to King County, such as general ledger, chart of accounts, and financial statements, that we have a process and tools to detect and prevent fraud. So for example, we want to make sure that the child care sites and the child care workers are actually who they say they are. So what will we need to be looking for to ensure that the resources are going to the intended workers. We also want to make sure that we are able to report out all of the King County reporting information that we need to be accountable to Best Starts for Kids. So that would include things such as demographics. We would want to have some specific data related to the actual payments. And these are just examples. When we work together, we would be developing these reporting measures together. And then this group would also need to have some type of customer service available to be able to problem solve and troubleshoot directly with the applicants or pilot participants. So for example, if a payment doesn't come through, they have a phone number or a person that they would engage with directly to be able to problem solve and receive their payments. So these phases are pretty similar to the phases that you saw for role 1. We think that, again, this beginning part of the design period is really going to be focused on collaboration and the design and development, evaluation planning, and then we'll move into that launch phase where we're actually issuing payments or enrolling workers, making tweaks to our processes and providing that customer service. And then the maintenance is where we want to be flexible of we might need to reassess. We may need to change some things, and they might be big changes. They might be small changes, and we're just not sure. So we want to build in that flexibility. Roles could change, responsibilities might be adjusted. And as we're learning, we would be in conversation around what is needed to best support the ongoing maintenance of the pilot. The last role is what we've called our wage boost work group lead. So again, the same contract period. The resources are going to be $525,000 for the 3 years, and again, the intention to continue in 2027 with the addition of some additional resources. And this work group lead will really support the entire pilot. So it will convene a group of ideally pilot participants, others in the child care sector, to bring them together to support looking at data, giving voice to those that are engaged in the pilot to be able to share learnings or feedback, but also that this group is helping us to think through the evaluation. How do we make sense of the learnings? How do we contextualize the learnings? What's maybe missing from our evaluation that we want to collect through stories? And then how do we build in those processes? And this group will also help us to think about where there are opportunities to leverage our learnings. Are there groups in the local community that we want to connect with? Are there groups within Washington or nationally that we want to ensure that we're connecting with, building relationships with, sharing out our learnings? What's the best way to share our learnings? Should we be creating, slide decks? Do we want to create videos? So really thinking about how we also then communicate out. I also imagine that this group will be doing direct sharing and messaging. So are there panels or presentations that this work group will be hosting to be able to share out our learnings? So the qualifications for this one are a little bit different than the other two in that they're not as focused on the pilot design, but on the development of the work group. So this group is going to be ideally holds a really clear sense of how community connections are important to this work and how they can develop a feedback loop between the pilot and the communities that are most impacted. That this group has experience facilitating and convening community work groups, particularly for the purposes of supporting program design and evaluation. That they understand the landscape of the child care sector and networks in King County so that they know how to develop the relationships and where there might be opportunities for partnership or outreach. But this group has at least 2 years experience supporting community-driven organizing or advocacy or policy change. So again, if our emphasis is on creating long-term policy change, we want the work group to start thinking about how do we develop relationships, or how do we really share information in a way that will help us to get change beyond just this pilot. This group will be thinking about evaluation and the improvements of the pilots. We want to ensure that the group who's convening the work group has experience thinking through that type of systemic evaluation and the continuous improvement processes, and that they have knowledge of adult learning and have experience creating equitable and engaging facilitation, so that this is a group that people feel excited about coming to, they feel connected to, and they feel empowered by participating. These activities are slightly different than the other two because they are really developing that work group. So the design and launch, they would be developing the plan for the work group. They would be launching the work group, holding it. And then this phase 3 maintenance sort of takes on a different view than the other two roles. That once we begin to get more data, more learnings, this work group is going to be deeply engaged in understanding the evaluation, sharing out the evaluation, building relationships. So there's a lot to do, particularly related to this maintenance phase for this work group. So budget tips, we are asking that all applicants submit a budget for the 3 years that are within the contract period, but in anticipation of the phases. So, the roles in the budget could change depending on what's being asked in those different phases. So just keep that in mind. We have budget categories outlined in attachment D, and we ask that you use those budget categories. And if you're applying as a partnership for a singular role, we would ask that you put in under the subcontract the organizations that you'll be partnering with and how much of the resource would be going directly to those subcontracts to be able to fulfill the activities outlined within the specific role. So in summary, for all of these 3 roles, we have $21,400,000. And again, the majority of that is really that pass-through funding that will go directly to our child care workers. We have a 5-week window that this RFQ is open for. So all of our submissions are due by October 19th at 2 p.m. It is a hard cutoff line. So if you have not worked in Zoom grants, Joanna's going to give you some pointers, but just want to make sure that you're really tracking that there is a hard deadline at 2 p.m. And we do anticipate 3 awards, though that number is flexible depending on the proposals that we receive. So there could be an award for multiple roles going to one organization. And this is our timeline. It was outlined on the RFQ as well. We are at our second information session. You can continue to submit questions via Zoom grants if you have questions that come out as you're starting to work on your application. We do offer technical assistance, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. We will review the submissions, ideally be able to respond back to respondents in November for a contract start date in January. Okay, go ahead, Joanna. And actually, maybe I can just take a pause and see if there were any questions before we move on to the rating and review and then the Zoom grants. Okay, Go ahead, Joanna. If there are questions, though, feel free to type them in and I can answer also.
All right, thank you. I'm going to talk a little bit about the process for applying and for scoring. So you see here, there's going to be 3 different stages to the rating and review process. The first one is going to be administrative review, and we're just going to look through all the submissions to confirm that everyone who applied is eligible, the submissions are complete and responsive and received by the deadline. And that 2 p.m. deadline is a hard stop, so we may not accept anything we receive after 2 p.m. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then anything, all applications or all submissions that we receive that have passed administrative review will go on to a review panel, which may consist of King County staff, external subject matter experts, community members, evaluators, or members or designees of King County Council. And in that review panel, submissions will be reviewed and rated on a scale of low, medium, or high, which will be based on the entire submission package. And then we'll make recommendations and move on to step 3, which is the final selection, which will be approved of by the King County Division and Department Directors based on those recommendations, as well as any equity or geographic considerations. Next slide. So for the rating criteria, some qualifications will be given more weight and consideration than others. So please do refer to each of the attachments for the roles that you're applying for. We have marked the questions that will be given the most weight with 2 asterisks, and you'll see that in Zoom grants as well. So in each attachment, attachment A is for role 1, B is for role 2, and C is for role 3, as you see there. And each attachment contains the required qualifications for each role, as well as the overarching qualifications for all applicants. They'll also contain the narrative questions for each role, any other requests for information to help the review panel understand how each respondent exceeds, meets, or does not meet those qualifications. And the attachments also contain some examples of what a high confidence answer would look like, so that you can use that to gauge what you include and how much information you include in your submissions. And if final recommendations can't be made from the written submissions alone, the review panel may request interviews with respondents. And then also please note that respondents for role 2, which is the payment administration lead, may be asked to do a demo of their technical qualifications. Next slide. So a little more on how partnership submissions will be scored. There are 2 different types of partnerships. One is one partnership submission that is collectively submitted for a single role. So that would be more than one entity applying collectively for one role. In those situations, respondents applying as a partnership to the one role will have their submission evaluated the same as a single respondent would. If you are doing separate submissions for each member of the partnership. So if there's 3 members of the partnership and each is going to submit their own unique application for each of the roles, then respondents in the partnership will be reviewed and rated separately, and you'll just let us know in your submission who your partners are. Respondents' partnerships, as described in each RFQ submission, may be considered as a factor in the rating, so the strength of the partnership may be considered, but please note that respondents applying as a partnership for multiple roles will still be rated on an individual basis. And partnerships may or may not be awarded or denied contracts together. If the review panel does reserve the right to award a contract to more than one or more members of the partnership, but may decline to contract with other members. And here's a list of the attachments that we have in Zoom grants. Please make sure to review all the ones that are relevant to the roles you're applying for. That includes a description of the design and implementation lead, this payment administration lead, wage boost work group. We also have an attachment that has some information on the budget. The technical requirements is attachment E. If you are applying for role 2, payment administration lead, we do need you to fill that out as well in order to be considered a complete submission. And then attachment F is the list of TA consultants that you can reach out to. Please, again, note the deadline is October 19th at 2 p.m. Please ensure all your materials are complete and submitted before that deadline. If you are having any technical difficulties with Zoom grants, if it's well enough in advance of the 2 p.m. deadline, you can please reach out to at questions@zoomgrants.com. If you're getting really close to the deadline, please just email us all of your materials. Don't risk a late application. If you email us your materials, we can consider it accepted, but if you submit it late through Zoom grants, we can't. And then some submission tips for Zoom grants. There are 2 ways you can respond to the narrative questions. You can either compose your answers in a separate document and then copy and paste your answers into the Zoom grants text box. Please note that if you do that, Zoom grants does not always play well with formatting. So if you have any issues, the way you'll know that it's not saving is when you go to click outside the text box in Zoom grants, you'll see the word saving flashing in your screen for a very long time. If it doesn't stop flashing saving, that means it may be struggling with the formatting. So you can hit the refresh button at that point and then try clearing all formatting before pasting again. The other way you can do this is just to type directly into Zoom grants and just make sure you click outside the text box occasionally, because that's what saves your work. We don't want you typing for a really long time and then it doesn't save later or there's a problem. And then also please note that the question numbering you see in Zoom grants may not correspond with the narrative questions that you see in the attachments. It's just because of the skip logic. So based on your response to question 1, which is which roles you're applying for, the questions will populate based on that. And then again, if you're having any technical difficulties with Zoom grants, you can email questions@zoomgrants.com. They usually do respond pretty quickly, but in an abundance of caution, if it's the same day, you may want to reach out to us at DCHS contracts at kingcounty.gov, and I'll see if I can help you. Just in an abundance of caution, please always make sure to email your materials if you think there's any risk of missing the deadline. So any questions on that process? All right, I'll pass it back.
All right, thank you, Joanna. Just to know also, we put in, excuse me, some language on the questions related to the anticipated page number or the number of pages to be able to appropriately respond to the questions. In Zoom grants, you're not able to see the number of pages, it's characters. So those are just a guide for you to get a sense of how much information we're looking for. So these questions that are in this RFQ can be pretty meaty. So we want to make sure we're giving you some type of boundaries around how much information and detail we're expecting. So BSK, Best Starts for Kids, offers free technical assistance for organizations, and this is part of our commitment to centering equity. So the technical assistance is for organizations, particularly that have not received government funding in the past, might be smaller community-based organizations, and the technical assistance is available for you to be able to support your application process. There is a list of the technical assistance providers that are contracted through King County to provide resources to applicants. This is again free, and technical assistance providers are available for you to be able to assist in determining the fit for the RFQ, to be able to provide guidance and answer any questions. They can look over your application, but they cannot provide direct grant writing. Do we have any technical assistance providers on the call today that want to say hello? Okay, I don't think so. But if you have any questions about technical assistance, please take a look at that final attachment, and there is some additional information on how to access the providers. So just to summarize, we have the DCHS contracts email for any questions. There's information about the technical assistance in the RFQ. There's a glossary of terms for definitions, and there's a checklist to ensure that for each attachment that your submission is complete. And that ends our formal presentation. But I do want to take a moment. If anybody has any questions that you wanted to bring up to the group, or if you wanted to type anything in the chat, feel free. And we can stay on for a few moments to answer any of those questions. I just put in the link to the Best Start to the Kids blog. You can find information here and about the technical assistance, as well as the wage boost pilot as well. And I see a question. That is a good question, Sarah. So will licensed family, friends, and neighborhood care providers, FFNs, be eligible to participate as a recipient of the wage boost? Currently, that is not within our eligibility, but as I shared earlier, we are still really in the design process. So there is potential for I think that conversation to be had with the groups that are going to be working on the design and implementation. Okay, I'm happy to stay on for a few moments longer if you have any questions, but feel free to email us if anything comes up after the fact. And thank you for joining us today. I am going to turn off the recording.